Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our esteemed panelists. And I believe we have 400 registered participants for this discussion. And the question that we're going to answer today is there a skills gap in the renewable energy sector in South Africa? And if so, how are we going to bridge it? What to do? We also would like to welcome the following media who's in-house. I'm quickly going to read them down for us. It's the Green Economy Media, the Citizen, Black Tie Media, Business Day, Creamer Media, Engineering News, and Takasela News Services. Welcome, everybody. We really appreciate you sharing in our webinar. And then for all our registrars, there is a poll posted in the chat, and there are 3 questions. So we would love you to share your opinion in answering the following questions. Do you think there's a skills shortage and do you think there's a skills shortage? Obviously, that's what our panel is going to discuss, but we would like to know if you think there's a skills gap in the renewable energy industry in South Africa. Yes or no? The second question is, do you think there is a job shortage in the renewable energy industry in South Africa? Yes or no? And the third question is, do you think it's an experience gap in the renewable energy industry in South Africa? Right, so if you can share that with us. The poll will be open until the end of the webinar. Right, excuse me, guys. And there will also be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So you're welcome to post your questions in the chat area, and we will consolidate that, and depending on our time, we will endeavor to answer as many of your questions as possible. Right, so to introduce our panelists, I am going to share with you that they are all subject matter experts representing a variety of industries. We have experts from the wind industry, from permitting, bidding, building, operational risk management support. We have solar energy experts represented by both the rooftop and solar farm experts. We have a researcher on our panel to give us some perspective on the sustainability of renewables. And we have a consultant on the panel as well with 20 years of experience in the mine and power station closure, addressing another very burning question, the concept of just transition. You can find the bios for all 8 of our panelists on the CTU website. You can see it there at the back on the other side, ctutraining.ac.za, like that. Click on the events tab and you will find this specific event on the website, and you can find all the details of our panelists. However, at this point, I would like to ask each one of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. Maybe we can start with Dr. Lauren Haywood.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lauren Haywood. I am a senior researcher at the CSIR in a research group known as Sustainability, Economics and Waste. My main research really is around trying to apply sustainability science techniques to understand and to better contribute towards sustainability, addressing the global challenges that we have around climate change and obviously biodiversity loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Ricardo?
Hi everybody, my name is Ricardo Bühler. I'm the Managing Director of Obelisk Energy. We are a service supplier to the wind industry. during the full life cycle of a wind farm, from the time that development is done until possibly the time that the wind farms are going to be decommissioned.
Thank you, Ricardo. And Div Botha.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, the Villiers Botha, or DIF in short. I'm a co-founder of SolarF. So we're an EPC in the solar energy space, focused on what we used to call the rooftop or small-scale embedded space, and now moving into the medium space that we call, where we'll soon have wheeling and those type of projects. And then I'm also a management committee member of SAPVIA, which is the Photovoltaic Industry Association.
Thank you, Div. Dr. Clinton Carter-Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. Clinton, I'm a Chief Commercial Officer of G7 Renewable Energies. We're a large utility developer and IPP specifically focused in wind, although we're also doing large-scale PV and battery storage systems as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Welcome. Dr. Abby.
Hi, I am Dr. Abby Nanda Bauman, the Academic Dean of CTU Training Solutions. And my research inclination is towards human resource management, particularly towards job shortages, supply and demand in the industry. So very, very excited to be a part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Then we have Carla Hudson.
Good afternoon, I'm Carla. I'm a principal consultant at ERM, and I'm looking at sort of the just transition and how and what skills are needed for the community to uplift and adapt to the energy transition that we're currently going through. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Dr. Retabile Melamu.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Retabile Melamu is my name. I'm the CEO of the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, SAPVIA, and I have my boss on the call, Dev, as one of the board members. So SAPVIA looks after the interest of solar PV players, and our members operate along the solar PV value chain. And our interest is to ensure that they get access to market opportunities, but also that the regulatory and the business environment is conducive for them to operate and grow their businesses. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Tavi. Davin Chan.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Davin Chan. I'm the chairperson of the Genesis Infrastructure and Renewable Energy Group. We've been in this energy industry, particularly renewables, since the late 1990s, early 2000s. So we've been around the block a bit and had a good sense to watch how this industry has grown over the years, which has been very exciting. And I'm also on the board of the South African Energy Storage Association. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Dr. Titania Stefanesinke. I hope I have that right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. We can hear you.
So it's not doctor, it's just Titania Stefanesinke. I'm the general manager at Mainstream Asset Management South Africa, which is a subsidiary of Mainstream South Africa. Mainstream has been in the country for more than 10 years, developing projects, constructing wind and solar projects, as well as managing operational wind farms, of which my company is currently managing 610 megawatts of plant of generation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. My name is Isa Swat. I am the host, and I'm from CTU. CTU is a private tertiary education provider that's part of the UXI group of companies. We empower people through education. I'm the head of program for the new Faculty for Green Technologies, and this is our very first webinar, and we are so excited and delighted to have all these experts to participate in this webinar with us. What else can I tell you about CTU? It's an award-winning private tertiary education provider with a national footprint of 11 campuses nationwide, and have a track record of 35 years of excellence. There's faculties in IT, design, business and management, engineering and humanities, and students have the choice to study either full-time or part-time. And CTU believes that skill shortages are a key threat to the future of South African businesses, and therefore this webinar, where we need this very current discussion on skill shortages in this growing industry. The Faculty of Green Technologies is currently seeking accreditation for various occupational certificates and planning to offer studies for solar, wind and hydropower technicians from as early as next year. We are onto it, and we cannot wait to make a start of it. And even more exciting are the skills that we believe that haven't yet been identified, that will maybe come up in our discussions today, and that will probably grow as the industry grows and we understand better what exact skills are needed. So thank you so much, everybody, for supporting us in this very important start for our faculty. Then just a quick discussion on the SA energy crisis. There was in the Daily Maverick an article last week pointed out that the belief has been for a very long time that improving the operational efficiency of current power plants can get us out of the load shedding grip much quicker than any other option. The problem, however, is that this has been the plan for many years. And despite billions being poured into the aging coal fleet, its performance has continued to decline, reaching an all-time low of 55% availability in 2022. So although we're not going to debate today if coal is on its path to extinction, and if renewable energy will be our saving grace, I don't think we want to get into that one, but we are going to discuss renewable energy. And in general, the focus of renewable energy is on 4 core areas. It's electricity generation, air and water heating and cooling, transportation, and rural energy services. South Africa first introduced the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, and in short, we all know it as REI4P, in 2011. The program includes an initiative to install 17.8 gigawatts of renewable energy in South Africa before 2030. So the goal of the REI4P is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's one of our sustainability goals there, while minimizing the country's reliance on non-renewable energy sources. South Africa views the green economy as a sustainable development path based on addressing the interdependence between economic growth, social protection, and natural ecosystem. So that sustainability aspect is always in the background, and we should always test ourselves what we keep ourselves busy with. Are we working in that space? But without a clear end-of-use plan for elements like solar panels reaching their end of life and wind turbines causing microclimate change, what are the sustainable issues we need to consider? And will this give rise, maybe, to a secondary skills gap in the future? So the first question I'd like to put to the panel is, how do we address sustainability in the renewable energy sector? Dr. Lauren?
I answer the question. Thank you. Well, I think it's really important for us that question. It's really important to first understand that renewable energy does not necessarily mean sustainable energy. It also does not mean renewable idea because of the energy source either coming from replenishable energy, replenishable source such as the sun or wind. However, this is not necessarily the case. I mean, that the supply might be sustainable, but we have to remember that sustainability in itself actually refers to a product having no impact on the environment and society in the short and the long term. And this is not necessarily the case that we are seeing in our renewable energy sources currently. We are seeing unintended consequences emerging from renewable energy, specifically in relation to the solar and the wind fields. So yes, renewable energy is great and we need it because it addresses our carbon emissions, which we have to drastically decrease if we want to start addressing climate change. But there are unintended consequences that we need to start taking into consideration before they become a big problem in the future. And I think a classic example of that would be plastic. So, for example, plastic was this wonderful, amazing product that came on the market, and I think we can all agree that it has had significant convenience in our lives. However, we do know that nanoplastics and microplastics have reached, or shall I say, affect every aspect of ecosystems on this planet and are causing major problems. And this was because we never foresaw or took into account the impacts of plastics from the very start. So I think this is where we need to start looking at sustainability in the renewable energy sector, in not just from the fact that it is a carbon reducing source, but also understanding the unintended consequences. So like you mentioned, Issa, the solar panels or the solar pylons, we have not actually designed out the problem of waste related to that. So what happens when the solar panels reach their end of life? There is currently no recycling market for these panels. Hopefully that will change in the future, but currently that's not the case. And these panels contain metals that could contaminate the environment, as well as plastic polymers. And also the solar panels are really water intensive. They need to be cleaned so that they can work optimally. And so there also needs to be consideration of what and how we can address the water issues associated with those panels. And then with regards to wind, even though wind is fantastic and that it does not require water, studies have shown that the winds and the turbines are really affecting microclimates in an area because they are changing the downward and upward thermals or currents in the air, and this is starting to affect climate. And one of the things we're trying to really do is reduce our impact on climate. A study has shown that if we have a reliance on wind energy, 10% of that globally, it will cause a temperature change of at least 1 degree in the world. So we don't really want to do that. So sustainability is definitely an aspect that we need to start taking into consideration. And I'm talking about the social and environmental impacts, the long-term impacts of this. And I think there's definitely a skills shortage in this regard. I mean, we all forging ahead like crazy because we need to get solar panels and wind farms up to address our energy challenges. But there are opportunities for us to actually understand what those damages are and start designing them out already. So there's definitely a skills opportunity for individuals in designing sustainable products. So this itself is a new area of research and it is emerging more and more as we start understanding these impacts. And I think there are also opportunities that we start looking at, well, what other opportunities are there? So we know that solar, for example, makes use of large land areas. There's also opportunities of how we co-design with the ecosystem. So looking at opportunities for different land uses under those panels, such as agricultural land. And then we need these individuals and skills to come about there. And also sustainable construction. It's not just enough for us to put up the solar panels and the wind turbines. We've got to do this from the perspective of a sustainable construction. So there needs to be greater emphasis on those areas and those skills as well. Thank you. So I'll leave it there for now.
You are on mute, Issa.
Thank you, Dr. Abby. Lauren, thank you so much. I see a lot of nodding of heads. I think you touched a nerve there, definitely. We have to consider the sustainability aspect with what we are busy with. Dirk, is there anything that you would like to contribute to that discussion?
Yeah, I want to take it back to how our industry evolved. And I mean, Devin, Clinton, and I were in this industry since way back. I think Ricardo and and no mainstream as well. We were all invested in this industry, let's put it almost before the curve in South Africa. But what was the beauty of our industry in South Africa was that we had an organic growth in our system. So, and that's part of the sustainability in our country, our renewable energy developed. In Europe, we saw the subsidies from government sustaining their industries. And if we take Germany, for example, they developed their whole renewable energy industry in reverse. They first did, call it small-scale rooftops, and then went into the larger-scale systems. Whereas we started with the reprocess, and then our SSEG grew. But we were following behind the curve, and it's perhaps not always a bad thing, like with many other industries that we currently see with the EV industry, that we are a few years behind the curve. So we can take learnings from the other countries, the first world for that matter, if we could call them that, and then apply that here so that we don't, say, waste the money twice that they've already wasted on it. And on that point is that the subsidies that they initially had to be withdrawn, and the financial sustainability of their systems created a bit of a problem. Whereas with us, we know the costs of electricity from the grid is now what we compete against, and it's going to continually rise, which creates the opportunity that we know that the systems that we build today would be, well, there would be a market for them tomorrow. It's not as though it's going to be a subsidy that could be retracted and perhaps next year our clients are at a deficit.
Right. Good point there. Davin?
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in with a couple of points to pick up on what Dr. Hayward has mentioned. But I think particularly interesting to look at the sustainability issue and to perhaps, I think every time I hear people talk about sustainability, I hear a different definition and people come up with their own definitions. So at what point, I suppose, will a society get to a point where it has a common understanding of sustainability and what it means? And I'll take you perhaps back to something in the mining industry that during my consulting days, I worked with a very big extractive industry, and I had a very interesting discussion with a chief financial officer that when we raised the issue of sustainability, and this was early 2000s, the sustainability officer that was in the room, this chief financial officer, flew off the handle at both of us and said, "How dare you tell me what sustainable is? My company's been around 120 years. You have no idea what you're talking about as far as sustainability goes." And that for me then just put into perspective this issue of how do we define sustainability and which set of impacts are we going to be willing to stomach and which can we afford to stomach and then conversely not afford to stomach, what costs are we prepared to forego and what costs are we prepared to incur in ensuring that as a species, as the human race, we keep going on this planet. And that's a debate that I often find is fraught with different views, perspectives, and one wonders looking at the fact that COP27 is on the go, whether we're actually going to get, after 27 years, some sort of consensus about how we're going to reach this lofty goal of sustainability, given everything we've seen around us. And when I look at perhaps going back to Sapphire days, there is some work that we were doing around recycling of PV panels. So I think Dr. Hay would be happy to hear that from Sapphire's point of view, we started looking at this a number of years ago, and there is actually a recycler in the country that's starting to do some work. So I think that whole concept is taking root, but how far you go and how fast you go and how fast you can afford to go is the other question around what is it going to cost us or not cost us. And that is something I'd be really keen to look at and think that as an industry, we probably need to take a greater look at as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that, Davin. Yeah, it's always that balancing act that we need to figure out. There's no perfect world, but we need to figure out how to do the best that we can. Just some feedback on our first poll. Just give me a second here. We say that the first question is, does our the people who registered, for the webinar, think that there is a skills shortage, and we have a poll that says 97% thinks that there are definitely a skills gap, and the 3% says no. So that is always interesting to hear that counter arguments. I think our support system can now open the second question for us. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for that, for answering that first question for us. So the question is also, the next question will be, can we deploy enough renewable energy capacity quickly enough to transition to a green economy prior to a total collapse of our energy supply? And is there a skills gap, and is there a skills gap that could contribute to this objective not being achieved? A linear deduction is that to deliver the REI4P, as well as enable the feasibility of private power generation, a new generation of skills will grow in demand, particularly around solar and wind technology. So to what extent do our panelists agree with this statement, and what are the skills that are needed? So is there a need for a critical skill set in the renewable energy industry, and in which part of the value chain will we find that? Dr. Clinton?
Yeah, so look, personally, there really is quite a substantial skill sets gap that I think we as a country have, and in particular in the renewable energy space. I think it's a massive opportunity. I don't think there's a lack of good potential projects out there, but it's this age-old challenge of being able to link buyer and seller in a commercially attractive way. And that really requires quite deep commercial, financial, and technical skill sets to be able to identify the right kind of projects, the right technologies, the right partners, being able to develop those in the right parts of the country, understanding the dependencies of things such as grid access, an evolving and changing regulatory environment, how the wheeling frameworks with the likes of Eskom and municipalities work, what buyers need, what they're prepared to pay for, being able to develop out the power purchase agreements. Prior, in the previous sort of, when REAP was the proverbially only show in town, that was relatively straightforward, but still itself quite cumbersome and restrictive. Now with the private sector PPA space growing out, a lot more opportunity, but it's a complex space. I think once we have the projects that have reached financial close and we start to take them into construction and operations, there's just so much opportunity to develop out young people, develop new talent and capability. I think what we see, and others as well, I'll be interested, the thoughts of my fellow panelists, is that to get the projects there, you actually need fairly seasoned transaction advisors and specialists in this space. And I think fortunately what we're seeing is quite a bit of cross-pollination, and it's perhaps not surprising then that some of the oil and gas, mining and other industries are looking at the renewable space, seeing the opportunity and looking to deploy there. One can answer, or you can question the sustainability, but there is wonderful impact to be had, and leveraging some of those technologies of old, or industries of old, and taking the innovation and that sort of deep understanding of project finance, commercial finance, and how to get projects bankable and into close. So seeing a lot of need for the skills development in that space. And then you need seasoned senior people then that can be guiding and mentoring the more junior staff through those processes. Once that's well established, we'll have there's a thriving industry that sort of becomes largely self-sustaining in terms of skills base. But right now, that's where I'm personally seeing a lot of challenge, is the ability to connect projects with off-takers, understanding that complex environment and developing out skills in those areas. There's lots of people that say, look, interested in sustainable renewable energy, even prepared to pay a premium for it. But to actually get to bankable projects, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and that requires a lot of human capital with the right mindset, perseverance, and skill sets. And I think as a country, we're still building that out, making great inroads, no doubt, but a lot to be done in that space. Thanks.
Clinton, so would you be of the opinion that that is where one should focus now in terms of skills gap, you know, to get projects bankable? Or should one already start developing for when those bankable projects have been built and need to be sustainable and carry on?
You have to do both. So, I mean, if you know your pipeline, you know that you're going to have projects going into construction. You've got to have the people that can build them. You need to have the people that can operate and maintain them. But you know, the start of that value chain is simply, you know, unlocking the projects themselves and the enablers for that. You need to have the right skill set sitting in the likes of NERSA, DMRE, ESCOM. You know, I mean, we can have great projects and opportunities in parts of the country. If we simply don't have the transmission grid capacity because we don't have line servitudes in place, you take it down to root cause analysis. Maybe as a country, we need to be investing in people that are out negotiating lands and rights for ESCOM. You know, what are those key bottlenecks, getting them resolved so that projects can flow? But that doesn't mean we sit on our hands. You know, we need to be getting the construction and operations side of the business ready for that. But I think largely that can be scaled up quite quickly with the right planning. But you need the right enabling skill sets that support that ecosystem. Otherwise, we'll have a whole lot of people trained up as wind technicians, for example. But if projects aren't closing and entering commercial operations, you know, that pipeline's not going to be fully utilized.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Dr. Abby?
Thank you, Dr. Clinton. Isa, you and I being in the profession of transferring of skills, it is very important to understand that skills matter because they act as an enabler. And it is very important for us that we understand that youth in training today will be the labor force for tomorrow. And I agree with Dr. Clinton that definitely the lack in skills provision is due to different reasons, because it's also about businesses, change in customer demand and supply, sometimes technology and innovation, sometimes even, as it is said, that climate change and environment degradation. But we also need to talk about STEM skills, the lack of STEM skills that we have in our nation, especially not only in terms of students, but in terms of our teachers and students as well. And they proper trainers in STEM skills, and that is extremely important in order to have or reduce the gap between job demand and supply that we produce on a yearly basis. I also believe that there has to be a strong coordination between environment policy and skills, because we all would agree that that green technologies or green is a cross-cutting topic that goes beyond sectors. So it is not only about green technologies, and youth has to be transferred with skills of structural changes and the mindset in terms of understanding or to instilling the willingness of understanding sustainability and renewable energy. And I also believe being in terms of doing research and data, there has to be more data, especially with reference to green, in terms of incidents, wages, jobs required, salary structure, and that is what is going to help a lot of trainers, researchers, as well as people that are interested in transferring skills and reduce the gap in our nation.
Fantastic. Tanya, would you like to add to that?
Yes, Isa. So I agree with Dr. Clinton that there might be projects, or there might be enough projects at the moment, but there isn't enough projects in the pipeline to get us to that goal for 2030 in terms of 17.8 gigawatts, right? And so I believe that the full value chain actually requires an increase of skills, which starts for us specifically on the development side of projects. we already struggling to find specialists out there. So during your environmental assessment, assessments, you have to get specialists to conduct those studies, and they're scarce at the moment, right? And they're already scarce, and yet we need to accelerate the installation and construction of renewable energy facilities. And hence, I believe that it's right from the development phase right through to the operational phase, and even the rehabilitation and decommissioning phase as well. We need to unpack all the skills required across the whole value chain to make sure that that skills pipeline is sustainable for us getting to that 2030 goals.
Davin, before I get to you, Tatjana, whose responsibility is it, or who do you think will take on the task of actually developing this framework of skills that we need, or, you know, listed? What is it that we actually need, starting in the beginning of the pipeline and ending at the end of the pipeline?
Well, I think the EWCTA is really keen to work with industry on this matter. They've certainly reached out, and they've been at both SAPFIA's conference here and at Windaba, where they've indicated that they're willing to actually assist in understanding and unpacking what that skills pipeline looks like and coming up with a plan. So certainly, from Mainstream's point of view, we're partnering and collaborating with them. I think there's a key part, and I think one of the speakers spoke to that we mustn't underestimate the what happens prior to tertiary education. It's important to understand that there is enough from a primary and a secondary schooling, that there's enough pipeline to feed into tertiary education. And just on the tertiary education, I do believe that we also need to collaborate with the Department of Higher Education to understand how we actually include into the curriculum the specific requirements for renewable energy, but then also how the current curriculum does support. And if you go and undertake an engineering degree, how do you need to tweak that to actually be ready to, you know, kind of hit the road running when you get into the RE space? But transferable skills from one sector to the other, to our sector, is definitely what we need. We can't think that we're going to be hosting all skills and actually developing them only in our sector. It has to come from other sectors. Again, at the rate that we need to accelerate this installation and commissioning of plants, we're going to have to get skills from other sectors and try and see how we can upskill them. Combined with that, we need to make sure as an industry that we collaborate with EWCTA. And, you know, from our side, where we have projects in the communities, we sponsor teachers at the moment that does maths and science at schools, because those schools in the rural areas does not have access to STEM subjects. And so it's important that you look at it holistically and understand where in the value chain, even in the schooling system, you start to collaborate with government.
That's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. That's where we need to start. Davin, did you want to contribute?
Just something interesting, that Green Cape did a study earlier this year and looking at skills gaps and the skills needed across various parts of the renewable energy supply chain. So I think that study was very telling and very interesting to start really having a look at what Tatjana is saying, you know, what comprises that supply chain and where are the skills? Because often I think in South Africa we've very much been focused in some of the policy debates, particularly on how do we create jobs in manufacturing in that supply chain. And manufacturing is not really where we're seeing the jobs are going to be created. And it's, as the other panelists have said, it's across the full value chain, looking at that full life cycle. That's really important to understand that and the timing. And it almost brings me full circle to the time when we signed the Green Economy Accord. One of the big things that Minister Patel raised with us during our deliberations was what was termed an aspirational goal as to how many jobs would be created. And that was almost in a vacuum of understanding what really is there and what do we need to create and where would we focus. And I think now, looking at it almost 10 years down the line, we have a much better sense of where these jobs need to be created, where the opportunities lie. But again, it comes back to some of the work the government needs to do to say, how aspirational is our renewable energy target? If I look at countries across the world and the scale and speed at which other countries are expanding, and I look at South Africa, we're a bit of a late comer to the party, so to speak, and our ambitions are a little muted compared to the potential that we actually have. And that is one, for me, one of the big issues of, I wouldn't say it's a letdown, but it's an issue that I turn on and say, are we really being, as a country, as ambitious as we could be, considering what Lauren has raised earlier about let's properly step into this expansion and make sure that we're doing it correctly so that you don't sit with these unintended consequences. So that's, for me, very important. And the last point, just to make what Titania was saying around skills and where are we going to get the people, are they out there? Is the supply of skills there? There's an issue for me that is, I'd say, more concerning, is when I looked at the BUSA publication this morning and the assessment by the ILO on our unemployment rate, particularly in age groups, as they categorize it, of 15 to 24. And whilst the rest of the world's gone up, I think it was from 14 to about 16% in that category, unemployment, we are sitting, and we've gone from 57% to 61%. So again, if I look at South Africa compared to everybody else, where everybody else is really pushing and has got this ambition to drive and expand, South Africa seems a little stuck. And for me, therein lies this bubble that we're trying to look at, is to say, where do we need people? What have we got? Where are people really ready that with a little bit of effort can really readily get into the industry? But what do we do with this burgeoning group of young people, this big unemployment bubble that sits in what I think is going to become more and more restless group of people who are saying, where are the opportunities and how do we get in there? Because it's such a large group of people. And therein, for me, lies, from an industry perspective and as an employer, looking at what would we do to make a dent in those kinds of numbers. So the sustainability issue on the one hand, and then on the other hand, how do we draw more people into an industry in an economy that seems to be struggling to keep up with itself? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Devin. Tabi, would you like to contribute on that one?
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Isa. Really great inputs from panelists. Without repeating what they said, I think the skill planning in the country is important. And we need to be mindful that we are sitting on a problem, just to emphasize the point that Devin has made of huge unemployment in the country, and understanding that not everybody will go to universities and have the technical skills and go have engineering skills the way we see them. So we almost need a dual effort, an effort that looks at technical skills and non-technical but highly qualified skills, but also think about how we're going to address the people that are not highly skilled but can be upskilled to operate in the renewable energy space. And I will make an example of the PV Green Card Initiative. But really, I think government and high institutions of higher learning and even civil society need to rally and develop a comprehensive plan. We have ambitious targets to roll out 5 gigawatts of renewable energies per year. And we haven't really unpacked what kind of skills would be required. Yes, we definitely will look across the value chain, but how many EIA specialists, for instance, that will be required to achieve the goal that we want to achieve? How many farm technicians are required? Are there institutions who are offering that type of skilling or qualification that will allow us to have hundreds and thousands of PV farm technicians. I'm just simply using that as an example. But all I'm saying is that we need to have the end goal in mind. And if the end in mind is to have 5 gigawatt of renewable energy rolled out every year, we need to be able to articulate what we need along the value chain in terms of skills. The Green Cape has done a bit of work, groundwork on that, but it can definitely be built on. So then you have identified that, look, you need X number of maybe transmission engineers, or you need people that are able to install on PV rooftop. And please bear with me, because I'm going to make examples in the PV space because that's where I operate. Then you need to, once you have developed a comprehensive plan, you're thinking, so what should institutions like CTU be doing, or TVET colleges? What does the industry say they need? And I think that's one of the interesting initiatives that Green Cape is running currently, dealing with the mismatch. The technical institutions or the colleges and universities are going on their own tangent and training people for this industry. Then industry says, actually, you are not training for our industry. How do we bridge the gap? How do we make sure that those that are training are in conversations with industry, just to really make sure that there is no misalignment between what actually is required in industry and what is being offered by the training institution. So bigger plan, addressing the mismatch, but also addressing the not so highly qualified bunch of our population that are becoming increasingly restless. We're sitting on a serious time bomb if we don't address those skill sets. And maybe that's where the initiatives like PV Green Card come into play. PV Green Card, as we say within Savia, it's a stop measure. We are making sure that those that operate in the ever-growing small-scale rooftop solar PV are properly trained. We do so to ensure that the installations are safe and of decent quality. And the way we do it is in the absence of the standards, because there are no standards. Currently, the Department of Environment and Employment and Labor are developing those. How do we make sure that we address the need that exists? And how do we, and in addressing that need, how do we bring along those people that are sitting idle to make sure that they participate in this growing economy? And so we work with training institutions, we provide training. It's by no means sufficient, and qualifications would be required to achieve that 5 gigawatt goal. But we are beginning to impart skills on people that have basic electrician skills to ensure that they operate in that space. And given that the industry is growing, we can make a meaningful dent. So maybe the likes of the CTU and everybody else need to work more closely with industry, and they could do it through the SAWIAs, the SABVIAs, to understand what the industry needs are so that you can respond accordingly. Maybe let me stop there, Chair, and hear from other panelists.
Thank you, Tabi. Lovely input. Thank you so much. Ricardo, I know you would also like to say something about that.
I mean, a lot has been said. I think a lot that we discussed in preparation of the chat today was said as well. But what amazed me every time I listen to some other people that are in different parts of the value chain is that people often think about their part, obviously, and we just did hear now from Clinton that the very early part that we often don't speak about, like what he mentioned about, it's nice that we wanna put out projects, but if there is nobody that actually takes on what we produce, then the projects don't really help. So yeah, that part is always forgotten. And then the question that you posed to us was: is there a need for critical skill set in the renewable energy industry, in which part of the value chain? And it's very simple. It's every single part of the value chain that we need to look at. And it starts from where Clinton was talking about, from actually creating the environment, but also looking at where do we need these critical skills to be implemented in the end. And one of the things we always, or what I did here now from the panelists was, there is a critical skills required, and yes, there is an agreement that we need to educate people. But also, I think what we need to think about is where does it need to happen? There is obviously a lot that happened in the renewable sector. For example, in the south of our country and in the middle of our country, where initially the projects were located. But if you look at what's happened at the moment, it's going more and more towards the north as well, and that's where certain transitions are coming into place, where the skill set are there. We just need to tweak them a little bit to fit into our industry. If you look at the renewable industry, and I'm speaking about more the north of the country, where people have been historically working in the mining, in the coal industry, for example. But there will be more and more projects coming in these areas as well, specifically that the technology allows us now to build projects up there. But also there seems to be a better infrastructure to actually still be able to feed into the grid in the end. And I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well. One of the things we discussed as well is who is looking after these skills? What skills are required? And I think what I did hear out of the panelists is that often it's like a bit of a silo situation. So everybody looks at his own silo instead of looking at the bigger picture and having a plan in place. And I'm not sure if there is any intent to have a bigger plan in place where we look at what Billy also said, where she said, look, we need to know what do we want to achieve, number one, and then how do we get there, and have a proper plan in place where the employers can work with the plan, the educational institution can work with the plan, so that people actually know what do we want to achieve overall, and how is it sure that it's a sustainable investment that we make into this target or in this goal. And then obviously, if we all know where we want to go, we can start putting our energy onto this to achieve this target as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the gap that we will need to overcome is between the industry and the educators, so that we can meet each other and understand exactly what's needed and be on the same page. Absolutely. Right, so the next question.
Sorry, if I may still add to one still. Sorry, apologies, I didn't see the hand raise function on it.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks. What we've seen is everyone speaks about how are we going to make up for the jobs that are going to be lost in the mines and in the Eskoms of the world. And we should remember this is going to be a transition. It's not going to be a switch off of Eskom and a switch on of the renewables. We already see it in our firm where we have 3 employees, one of them are actually listening in today, that came from a household where they grew up in an Eskom household, by example, but they now work in renewables. So we'll see parents retiring in the coal space, to put it that way, and being employed in the alternative energy space, taking the broad mixture of energies that we'll see in the future. So it's going to happen over time. So answering your initial question, yes, it is possible for our 2030, 2050, 2100 moving to much cleaner and renewable energies in that sense. The problem we have, and yes, I'll take the criticism on that, but it's recent engagements I've had, and we've been involved, Tabby and I, with the Premier's Council of Skills in Cape, in the Western Cape especially, where we've engaged on what is needed, and it's a real active process with TVETs and so on coming on board with that. And my engagement with the Western Cape Education Department was also that our current, and I think perhaps this call is exactly the example. We were all coming from that age where our parents said, go to university, study hard to be able to go to university and go as high, get a level 8, 9 or 10 qualification, because then you'll have a job. And that's where we are. We're a bunch of, let me put it, learned colleagues on this call. But if we go look at what the requirement is and where our current education system sits, our current education system sits with 98% academic, 2% vocational. First world countries sit with 60% vocational, 40% academic. And yes, that's where our difficulty lies, is not only in getting the people. I think we have enough people hungry for work, hungry for education, vocational education. We have too little educators, and that's perhaps where we have the problem. And I like to be controversial, sorry.
We need that. Thank you for that. Right, great stuff. Let me see. I want to give feedback on the second question was, is there an experience gap? So the first one was, is there a skills gap? The second question is there an experience gap perceived by our registrars? And the answer is, again, 97% says yes, there's a huge experience gap, and 3% says no. Right, so we've put the third question out there as well. That is it a job shortage? Do you think there's a job shortage in the renewable energy industry in South Africa? So that one will also be highly interesting to see what our registrars think of that one. Right, so that is also then the next question for our panelists. To what extent do you agree with a statement that says, you know, there's a linear deduction to deliver the REI4P, as well as enable the feasibility of private power generation? A new generation of skills will grow in demand, particularly around solar and wind technology. Do you agree with that? So basically, is it a need for skills? Is it a need for no, I'm sorry. Are we talking about a skill shortage, an experience shortage, or a job shortage? I'm so sorry. Sal jy vir my die paneel terugsit? Thank you. So there we have Davin and Div again. You're welcome to give us your opinion on that question. I do apologize for that. So we continue with that thing of there is I had it as a 46% unemployment. We're now thinking already on a 61% unemployment. Should we focus on the skills shortage? Should we focus on the experience shortage, or on the job shortage?
Yeah, I'll stick my neck out there first then. I think all of them, all of the above. Where's that D? Is that the one? Sorry. What we experience now, and I think it's the enabling regulation has really assisted the 1 megawatt being lifted to 100, and hopefully then soon being lifted at all or completely. We've seen that the uptake of these projects and staying ahead of it, and we just look at the number of products that we imported into the country this year already. There's really exponential growth, and the jobs need to keep up. So the volume of people being employed across the whole skills chain, if I could call it that, from the laborers, skilled, unskilled, as well as up to our clever people doing, as Clinton said, the guys making the sums for the PPAs to work. Really, we need more of those, yes, across that, and that'll be the education as well as the number of people, yeah. And we really see a lot of requirement at this stage. I can say there's a shortage of electricians and engineers in our country. That's the reality.
Anything to add on that, Kevin?
Yeah, sure. A couple of other dynamics that are interesting for me in the industry. I have noted one thing from a recruitment point of view, that there are people are actively looking for jobs in the market in the experienced or relatively experienced skills pool. But I noticed that a lot of people are moving around. So you're seeing people that are there for a period of perhaps 9 months, 11 months, pushing to get recruited into better paying jobs, jobs that require a lot more experience, exposure, and skills. And I often ask myself whether we're not on a bit of a, what do you call those things, a hamster wheel, in a sense, with some parts of the supply chain of ours and the skills, because people are moving around from organization to organization and looking to acquire those skills to move themselves up. And whether in that haste of wanting to move and not bed down the skills that they actually need and stay around a bit longer, whether we're not creating a sort of a middle ground where the education system, in giving people experience and not just the education, isn't going to create a bit of a vacuum where we've got a much bigger pool of the experienced, learned, well-educated, university-educated graduates, etc., and we're going to find that we're not able to get enough people to move through from vocational into junior leadership positions. And that would be my second point, is, are we producing enough people that have got the leadership experience to lead organizations, to understand that macro context, to be able to engage and build the industry along with our policy-making colleagues? And I suppose the final point for me today is, as I look at all the debate that's been going on and where we're sitting, what Div raised earlier is absolutely crucial. And I think other panelists have touched on this in a particular ways. In our policy environment, in our economic setting, how do we fund this move? How does South Africa, in its current context that it sits in, actually move this industry forward in a way that grows industry, not just ours, not just renewables, but the other sectors of the economy, because the other sectors of the economy are the ones that are going to use the electricity. We sometimes forget that. Is that if we don't stimulate the rest of the economy and build the rest of the economy, we're going to be sitting with an awfully large surplus of electricity supply. So there's all of these things as we work with our colleagues in the policy side of things, that we've got people understanding the economics, understanding the policy environment, and creating that enabling environment that allows our economy to flourish and allows our sector to grow within that context as well. And sometimes we forget these. We focus, as one of our panelists put it, on the short term, on our own objectives and our own thinking within our own industry, but we don't often see those linkages to other parts of the economy that need to be stimulated. And that interaction with government is absolutely crucial, making sure that there is a long-term demand, and that demand is stable, because people wanting to come into an industry and create a career, from my experience, aren't going to come into an industry where they say there's stops and starts and we don't know if it's going to happen, we don't know how fast it's going to grow. So I'm not sure if I'm making the right career choice or going to get the right job experience in this renewable sector. And I think that's a bit of a challenge for us all as we move forward as well.
Right. Dr. Abby, did I see you raise your hand there?
All right, I didn't, but definitely I can add some points. I think that I would agree completely with Darwin and Dev, because in the morning I was the keynote speaker of graduation ceremony of Alviva, when the CEO said exactly the same thing. He's Mr. Craig Brunston, that it's not the achievement of academic excellence that helps, even if you graduate with NCAP level 8 or 9. Is the application of what you have learned in the business, and that is what is extremely important. As Dev has touched on that point, that even if 98% of the people are having NCAP level 10, but not being able to transform those skills actually in implementation of the business, then I don't think just gaining of skills would help if we don't know how to transfer or how to implement. And in terms of, just in order to touch upon, when we keep on talking about skills, I was reading an article when I could find that it's only 11.5 million people that are employed in energy sector so far, up until 2020. Maybe it has increased a little bit. With PV in definitely the market leader, followed by biofuels and solar and wind. However, hydropower and wind. However, what I believe, that when we talk about skills, it's not only about green skills. A lot of other skills are definitely interrelated, even if we are talking of green technologies, because at the end of the day, the business of business is business. So we need to have skills about, as we say, that IoT is everywhere, and IT is omnipresent, I guess, because right from the data analytics to data mining, today's power systems and software systems are also related, that in real time you get the sensors get to know about the smart grids, as per se. So, but it is also about benchmarking comparisons, and I believe that when we talk about skills, it is also the technical, not only the technical know-how, but also the skills like project management skills, because at the end of the day, it's capitals, it's large capitals. It is definitely professionalism, because now the people that we are dealing with are not technical or green tech savvy. So, so right from supply chain management to market to selling of that brand, you need to have the skills of problem solving and definitely critical analysis. So, so it's not only the green skills that is going to, I would say, shorten the skills gap or the job shortages that we have. So it's definitely active citizenship, and it's also the skills that are required in order to run a business. So in total, I think we need to expand our horizon when we are talking of job shortages in the country as a whole.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Abby. Clint, would you like to add something to that?
For now, thanks.
Okay. Excuse me. Okay, Titania.
Yes. So I want to echo what the other panelists said. I think the one thing that we see at the moment, there is definitely a job shortage, and people are jumping from one company to the other. I say they play musical chairs at the moment, which is not sustainable, right? We are solving the short-term problem and making a longer-term problem by doing that. So I echo what Davin said, that currently you'll see people that has just graduated. They're not embedding and applying the skills that they got. And then they move on, and long term that will catch up with us, not just in our sector, and other sectors as well. So currently job shortage is getting the priority, and it's being filled with people just poaching from one company to the other, which is actually going to impact the experience. And there's already a shortage of experience in the industry, but that is going to increase because of the solutions used at the moment on the job shortage. And then I think I wanted to just mention one or two things in terms of how do you keep these people to want to stay, and I understand that salaries might be one of them, but the other thing is if you recruit people and they understand what their career paths are and what are the skill set that they need to gain to get to the next career path, you might actually stay them longer. So I think there's work to be done on unpacking career paths and how current job descriptions transform into the next job. That's the one. The other aspect, just on the skills that's not necessarily green skills, is one example is transformers. We need transformers in coal-powered stations, but we need transformers at solar power stations. We need transformers at wind power stations. And so there are skill set that's really probably in the near future going to be critical, which people are not necessarily looking at in terms of when they procure in the manufacturing sector of what feeds into the energy sector, not just the renewable energy sector, but the full energy sector. So there's also skill set and experience and probably a job shortage in that space. Thank you, Isa.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So the answer that we got for our third poll question in terms of job shortage, we have 63% saying yes, there's a job shortage, and 37% says no. Right, so that's a very interesting one. Right. Okay, anybody else want to add to that specific discussion? Ricardo, you okay?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Right, fantastic. Okay, shall we go on to the next one? So the next question is, who needs to be skilled? And what is the role of just transition? And that's what we have Carla for. So how would the skills developed through this renewable energy industry expanding assist in ensuring a just transition? And are there any regional just transition platforms already in place, and what initiatives are being piloted?
Thanks, Etha. Yes, I just also would like to iterate that it initially started with a just energy transition, and now we add a just transition because there's much more that needs to transition than just energy. And once again, like the previous panelist has mentioned, is the industries that will benefit by renewable energy is also needs to be focused on. It's not just the jobs that's created in the energy sector, but the jobs that's being enabled through having reliable, relatively cost-effective energy. And that's what we're seeing. I'm currently working on a project in the Free State, and the communities is not actually being spoken to. They're not being roped in and actually ask, what kind of jobs would you be interested in? How do you see this just transition actually unfolding? And then there is a misunderstanding of what is a just transition, or what is a just energy transition. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the community surrounding these projects, and they want to know how they can be involved. And I think just the whole collaboration between sort of the government, the private sector, and the communities, I think we can broach those gaps of what skills are needed, what would the community think is needed. Because when we started talking with the community at this, immediately they came and said no, they can manufacture the solar panels and all of that. But the understanding of how this all fits in and the whole value chain needs to be understood and needs to be explained. It's all good and well you can manufacture a solar panel, but exactly who's going to be the off-taker, where is it going to be wheeled to, and all of that. And I think it's very important to understand this problem holistically, and not just and I always say energy and water is the two catalysts for any transition. If you've got water and you've got energy, then all other aspects of the economy fits in and can actually develop. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we really need to talk more, bring in the communities more, the concerned citizens, and actually look at a holistic solution to this. And then the platforms that is currently being developed, I know in Mpumalanga there is the Green Cluster Agency, which was started by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. As Mpumalanga is the hotspot, obviously, and this is where all the conversations are going. What's going to happen if all these power stations and coal mines close? I'm sure you've seen in the newspapers the Komati power station was switched off officially on the 31st of October, and there's an amazing plan that's being rolled out on what's going to happen with the lands, what's going to happen with the infrastructure. And that is a very important part, is to reimagine what is actually going to happen with the infrastructure that we already have, and not just always want to start new, and actually just think outside the box and see what other possibilities there is. And I mean, the Komati project was very well researched with the community, and they had a lot of communication with the community, and they designed these projects around what the community, because what they want and what they need is not sometimes the same thing. So once again, collaboration and speaking, and I mean, in Mpumalanga, that is they're bringing all the sectors together. So the water, the sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, that all the sectors actually can speak to each other, and that there is a whole value chain associated with that.
Thank you. So Lauren, you like to add to that?
Yeah, I just think, you know, what was said earlier too, when we were first talking about sustainability, and that sustainability itself has numerous definitions and used in numerous conversations here and in very different ways. So does it just transition. I mean, there's lots of aspects to transitioning, and what does it mean and things like that. So I mean, a lot of it and how we also see it, and some of the work that we're doing is ensuring that, you know, as we sort of move from sunset industries, maybe such as mining and coal and oil and gas, we transition the labor force to be able to operate in the renewable energy space. But what Carla has already said is really important, is that, you know, as these industries might start closing down, that land can get used for other good. In terms of the sustainable aspect, we don't want to just leave mining land, for example, just fallow there. It has opportunities. So there's a post-mining landscapes, which also part of the just transition is transitioning that land to have other uses. And you know, in very degraded land that cannot necessarily be transcended into anything productive, a viable option would be maybe solar energy power plants or wind, if that is in an area where such resources or such wind or solar is of high concentration. So yeah, I think from a sustainability aspect, there's a lot of application for transition. Definitely transitioning to becoming, I don't want to use the word more green because that's not necessarily it, but we're rather to transition to not only economy growing, but society and the environment prospering from the transition.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Yes, thank you. Would you like to
add to that? I think and this is what we call it now, we call it distributed generation. So what's going to happen is traditionally an energy engineer would have gone north. He would have gone, let's call it north via Megawatt Park to Mpumalanga originally. Now he's going to stay in Luriesfontein or in Uppington or in Bloemfontein, wherever those renewable plants are going to be constructed, maintained, and all of that. So we're going to have a distributed workforce and in that transition as well. By nature, as I said, it's going to happen by itself. We need not always force it, perhaps with a subsidy or likes. Some interesting thing that I realized, and I like the principle, the example of Komati. It's good that Carla brought that up. Is that I visited one of the top technical high schools in South Africa earlier this year. And on the open day, they took us through the workshops and all those. And I asked them, I said, well, how does it work? They said, no, the children can take one technical subject of the 4 that they presented there from grade 10 to matric. And then my first question was immediately to say, but how well are these facilities? Because it's perfect, big workshops. How well are they utilized? They said, no, 1 hour per day on average. Well, we've got these huge workshops that's got tech in there that we could really use better. And that's perhaps why I'm again with my whole vocational. We should really up that. We have already the buildings. We don't need to go and build new schools, new buildings, new bricks and mortar. We have them. We should just perhaps get, and I think that's why I mentioned earlier, the educators are perhaps the shortage more than the facilities in that sense. But yeah, Komati also a good example that we should look at what we've got and how we're going to transition everything that we've got, including the schools, including the power stations, for our future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that one. Anybody want to add to that discussion? Carla?
Yeah, I really would like to agree with that, because I think we sort of being sort of forced to think a certain way, and I think we really need to think outside the box and start, because as has been mentioned, I mean, the rest of the world is so much more ahead of us, and we're trying to follow. Maybe we should actually become the leaders, because we are in a different circumstance. I mean, South Africa is very different to Germany or to Poland. Our whole social structure is very different, and maybe we should stop trying to catch up. Maybe we should just realize that we must come up with our own solutions and try to do that, instead of trying to put a Western solution in our communities, because it is very, very different, and the fears and the aspirations are very different.
Again, see a lot of nodding heads, so that definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Carla. So the last question that I have is what we have touched on before, but what mechanisms should be in place to ensure the skills gap is bridged? And I think we've touched on, we first need to, well, not first, but it would be great if we could just sit down and color the landscape, make that little picture to understand what the value chain is, what fits in where, make a mind map to see who fits in where and who can benefit from what. Anybody else want to add to that? So what mechanisms should be in place to ensure the skills gap is bridged? Carla?
I think, so as previously mentioned, we really need to know what skills is actually required, because I mean, at the National Youth Development Agency, there's lots of youth that's registered with what they're interested in, and I think that those linkages should be made with what the industry is actually requiring, and what is available. I know there's quite a few international platforms that would like to come into South Africa and give vocational training, but they needs to say, listen, there's interest, and we should be able to produce those numbers and say, listen, yeah, here so many people are interested in this and so many people are interested in that, and then what jobs are actually available and what is needed. I think we really need to, maybe I should have a go and a look at the Green Cap study, and maybe work from there, but we really need to understand that.
Tanya? Sorry, Dr. Abby? Dr. Abby, you can go.
All right, thank you, Isa. In addition to what Carla said, I think I would like to take it more towards grassroots level and talk about primary education and secondary education as well, because it is extremely important that we step up our game in terms of primary education delivery, because I know that there was a research that was done recently by Department of Basic Education, and it was compared with 5 other education systems, IB, Netherlands, and 3 other. And we could find that we are way behind in science and in maths. So now there is introduction of robotics and another module that is being introduced by the minister. But I think there has to be more interventions and a proper analysis of what is required right from the primary and secondary level, because if you get into the data, you will see that most of the youth that pass out with matrics, they encounter a huge difference between what was transferred or delivered in matric and what is required at university level. And sometimes even if they go for vocational studies, there's a huge gap between what industry requires and what is imparted at primary and secondary level. So it has to start right from the very beginning, I believe, rather than pondering over what is required once they have already matriculated. So yeah, that's my stake.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll get to everybody. Tanya, would you like to add to that?
Yes, and I've just had a flashback where I met with community developers that was actually introducing STEM into ECD centers. And so sometimes we want to go into primary school and introduce subjects that the kids don't really like, and so I have seen where curriculum has been added to an ECD center level so that those kids start to like doing maths and science and understand. So certainly the full value chain, I agree. I think we've spoken about the other mechanisms, right? As the industry, we need to unpack what the skills gaps are and the jobs and experience requirement. But I also want to just mention, I think from the vocational jobs requirements. There is a lot of work that is currently being done, and Ricardo hasn't mentioned, but his company has absorbed some of our community-based. So in the Northern Cape, we have upskilled community youth in terms of technician work, and they have absorbed these. And I think it's important that we look at our current value chain. And I'm not talking about silo approaches, but we already have suppliers that we work with. We need to collaborate across our full supply chain and see where we can support jobs and upskilling of our community youth into our suppliers, call it service providers, jobs that they might require as well. And that's another mechanism of collaborating and increasing job and experience. And certainly Ricardo can add in terms of what they've done on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. I get to you now. Carla, you wanted to add something?
But it's just the whole system here. I mean, my daughter is writing matric at the moment, and I see her sitting studying in the evenings in the dark. And I just think, you know, electricity, once again, I'm just going to say electricity and water is actually crucial to this whole, for a whole country, because you need electricity to study so that you actually pass your matric so that you can actually go further and be part of an active economy. But just seeing in the schools as well, in the communities that I work, you know, their whole health and nutrition and sanitation, all of that becomes an issue. And I mean, that's also linked to electricity, because you can't have proper water and sanitation services if you don't have in the Limpopo, where we're working on the platinum mines, there's many communities that don't have water because they don't have electricity. So all of this is very much linked, and the whole education, I mean, if kids go to school hungry or they're not feeling well, so you really need to look at the whole holistic. I was laughing because I mean, my daughter was sitting yesterday studying in the dark, and they were writing maths today. So I was just thinking it would have been great if there was electricity last night, because maths is a really important subject.
Would have made maths a little bit easier. I agree.
Yeah, no, it would have made less grumpy. Yes.
Yeah. Ricardo, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just to the mechanism. We spoke a bit about you know, what needs to be taught in the schools and so on. But one thing we also need to understand is that the people that we addressed earlier, between 15 and let's say 24, they're very often the communities where the wind farms or the solar plants are located, and it's very difficult for them to actually get to where the skills improvement can happen, so where the training centers are and so on. So I think one of the mechanisms is also to bring those opportunities to them and ensure that the money that is spent, and we have to spend money in our industry on certain developments, that the money is spent in the areas where it's actually needed. And just going back to what Titania just said, her company sent a few people to be skilled up, to go to training centers, so they were away from their hometown for a couple of weeks, and they got trained up and they went back. And obviously it's important and also to let the people gain experience. And we were in the fortunate situation that we had a job which didn't require like super experienced people, but we just needed to have manpower. And we were actually instructed of Titania's client, or requested of Titania's clients to bring some people in. And I said, we don't have the people, and they said, no, but Titania has actually the people. If you get them, you bring them in, we can utilize your project to test them, and afterwards possibly give them work on our sites. And I believe out of the six, 4 of them, if not have been offered a job yet, but they will be offered a job going forward, because they could prove that they were actually, you know, they deserve this. And what we saw then is, you know, it's important that we don't, again, not just work in our own little silo, but that we do it a bit a bit more open-minded and work together. And we are an industry that doesn't need to be scared at this point, at least, that there is not enough work for all of us. I think there is work for everybody, and we can collaborate in a way that we can actually do good and bring the people, or bring the skills trainings to the areas where they are required. And this is something which I mentioned before, and now where we said initially it has been the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Northern Cape. Now it's going up towards the other side, and there is certain things in place already where there will be training center built, and depending on if they work in the end or not, I don't know yet. But there's a big plan to transfer the skill sets and be able to transfer the knowledge as well to the people in the area, and I think that's important. And this gives the people that actually, they went through school, and in certain areas or in certain parts of our industry, you don't need to be like the superhero in maths or the superhero in something, in one of the subjects, but you just need to be very good with your hands. And a lot of people are very good with their hands, and especially people in environments where there is maybe not, like, the schooling system is as up to scratch as it is in other areas, but they are very good because the people had to do this, and this is the people that we need as well. And we need to acknowledge that these skills are there and that we can actually build on them. And it's amazing what you can achieve with people that you even don't think that they possibly would have been able to to achieve what they achieve in the end.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ricardo. Right. So I think before we go to the final call of, is there any closing remarks? We have a few questions for Q&A. We have about 5 minutes left. Can I put those questions out to the panel? Are you ready for those? Let's see. I'm sure some of them we have already answered, and then we can skip them. So we have one. Is there really a shortage of skills? Will the panel please list these jobs more specifically? So we agree there is a need for that, to have a list of skills and jobs that we need. How would you describe the skill set? Project management, engineering, strategic management. I think it goes together with that effort that needs to go into consolidating and looking at the bigger picture, and how we're going to create a pathway, I think. Anybody else want to add to that?
Issa, if I can, just on, so we have done that for one of our skills. So technicians, plant technicians, not turbine technicians. And we've unpacked all the competencies required for plant technicians and all the competencies required for the career path that those technicians can take. And so we certainly have shared it with the industry in terms of understanding what those, and I think that's what the question was, what are those? And each job has a set of competencies, and each career path might have a set of different or additional competencies required. And I think it's important that the youth understand that. We need to understand it as well, but the youth, because that gives them the decision power on what career path they rather want to do. I can tell you one of them is definitely project management, which you've mentioned. Thank you.
Right. Great stuff. The next question is again, how about the path to acquiring these skills, and at what age should it begin? And I think we agree basically from the beginning, from secondary, primary school, and up from there. The next question we have, in terms of installation of solar installations, what is being done about incorporating qualified electricians into the solar installations? Maybe that's one for Div.
I think I'll step in there. So that's in 2016 we initiated from SAPVIA then the PV Green Card program and developed that. And that's not the only training program, let's just know that. But we were participating in the SANS, writing of the SANS 10142 extension for the DC connection of these systems. And we realized that's going to take very long for that standard to come about. was almost out last year and then it got retracted. So today still we don't have that standard. But what we did in the PV Green Card is to enable electricians and people to upskill themselves. But important also from that program is to say that it's an addition you can do. We actually need companies who are DOL registered to then do the PV Green Card. Yes, you can send anyone. You can literally send the receptionist or the lawyer in the firm or whatever to go and do that training, but you need a registered person, the electrician, in your firm then to be a registered PV Green Card installer. But that's how industry tried to get the electricians, let's call it, at least exposed to the aspects of DC. And that's something I wanted to mention also, that what jobs we need. We need a lot of people out there who knows why they should properly crimp an MC4 connector and why they need to use a torque spanner when tightening a solar panel on the roof. I think that's the basics where we need to start with them, but perhaps not telling them how to do it, but why they also actually do it, just as an example. So it's really from that grassroots level to upskill them.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Dev. Then we have a question, where is the interface between the public education departments and the CETA? In other words, how can course designers get involved at a secondary school level and in the vocational training space? That is the question. Anybody have an idea? Dr. Abby?
Thank you for putting me in the spotlight.
Good question.
Yeah, I was about to raise my hand. Just kidding. It's just that I believe that it's a very good question, because if you ask me personally, I believe that still we need that kind of collaborative interdisciplinary approach. In terms of, because I feel that still we are working in silos, and there is a lot of collaborative approach, because the other day I was reading that collaborative approach or collaborative intelligence is the new currency, right? Because whether it's green, whether it's IT, whether it's technical know-hows, if there is no collaboration, and especially going back to what the distinguished attendee has asked, that how come public universities, vocational institutions, private institutions, and secondary education that we are talking about, are we talking with each other? That's a great question, and perhaps the answer is no at this stage. And wherein I think this is just an endeavor from institutions like CTU Training Solutions, wherein we are putting an endeavor to listen to the industry, what industry demands from elite panelists like the panel. And it is our responsibility as a vocational education institution that we take this forward towards collaborative approach towards public universities, as well as step backwards towards secondary education. And I believe that link somewhere is definitely missing. And it's our core responsibility, I would say, or it's collaborative responsibility that we create that link. And that also falls in the value chain, because at the end of the day, it's the institutions that are producing talented youth, and that is what we are discussing right now. So I would say the question is brilliant, and I am short of answers right now, because this is what we are making endeavors towards making an approach and trying to put endeavors towards like reducing the gap of what is demand. What is the demand and what we supply? So hopefully our endeavors will lead to a better future. And I completely agree with the attendee's question that we need to make further efforts towards having further association and discussion with the other bodies as well. So completely agree.
Thank you, Dr. Abby. Great answer. Thank you to a difficult question. Thank you so much. I think we've got two questions left. So the one is there scope to retrain and reskill some of the existing Eskom staff as power stations like Komati goes offline? I think that's Carla.
Yeah, that was one of the elements that was very very, it's the priority, sorry. So yeah, definitely there are programs that focuses on reskilling and retraining and giving that option, yeah.
Absolutely, that it has been done once, so it will definitely, there's possibility for
So
it
it's a
to.
very important factor that is always considered, yeah.
Right. Right, we've got 2 more questions. The EWCETA, is the EWCETA getting the correct message?
I'm not quite sure what the rest of the question was, Issa, but I'll attempt to answer. So the EWCETA has been really active where they've reached out not just to the sector, but they've been at Windaba this year, certainly. They've been there every year, and they really trying to collaborate with all of us.
Need to be followed, and is there funding available for this?
Yes, I was trying to address the question because you were frozen there for a moment, and so I got half. It's fine. I got half of the question, but if I understand it, so yes, the EWCETA is really keen to fund as well as collaborate with the industry. They're certainly collaborating. One of they were part of a panel discussion at Windaba in October, and one of the questions they got was that there's a lot of health and safety training happening on, for example, wind farms that previously they didn't fund, and they obviously at the session confirmed that they are now funding it. So previously they would fund only certain specific skill courses in the industry, but they have extended that. So the EWCETA is really keen and open to collaboration. And in fact, we are again partnering with them and collaborating with them on how do we fill this skills gap.
Thank you, Titania. I was wondering now, why aren't you reacting to that question? Thank you so much. So I was the one that was frozen. My apologies. So can I repeat the next one? So Kevin Miller says, we specialize in PV installation currently. However, we would like to become a distributor of solar power electricity in the near future. What qualifications and procedures would need to be followed, and is there funding available for it? Maybe Dev?
Sure, I'm not sure if it means a distributor in the sense of a distribution license holder or a distributor of products. I think a distributor of products just sells, so you don't need a qualification necessarily to sell it because you're not installing it, like in the sense of an electrician. But to be a distribution license holder, you need to be someone who owns power lines. And that perhaps, I don't know if Clint or Davin, you could perhaps assist Ricardo, the guys and Tanya with the big systems, could perhaps assist us there. Those will be HV technicians, is it not so?
Yeah, it's not clear if it's then taking into the whole sort of trading, taking that PV and selling it to different off-takers, and that's a very sort of financial, commercial deal making, understanding the regulatory environment, quite legal. So that's quite a probably different skill sets to the ones that's selling kit. And I think it's still very unclear as to how that will all work in South Africa. So perhaps, and I think that's quite a difficult starting point. I think my advice with these things is always, and also, many of the entry points to the renewable energy industry are not going to be through renewable energy. I mean, there's going to be lots of people, for example, in Eskom that are experts in transformers, grids, power lines. You need all those skills in renewable energy. So, where can you get the training and the opportunity, and then be able to take that and take it into a new industry? and accelerate that transition. So I think that's where there's going to be a lot of opportunity. We mustn't think that the renewable energy jobs are all going to be created in renewable energy. You know, we need the artisans, we need the others that might be sitting in mining and elsewhere, and then jump into the renewable industry as soon as the projects start taking off.
Thank you, Clint. Okay, the last question, and then we'll close the webinar. Thank you. We have gone over time. Thank you so much for your patience. The last question is, how do you see the 8.5 billion fund from the US, EU, and UK allocated to address the issues of skill shortage, and is it enough? Titania, I see a smile on your face. Clint, shall we start with you again?
Yeah, look, I feel quite strongly that the private sector will create an awful amount of jobs. There's nothing like job creation and projects that are closing and that need to employ people. And when there's a pipeline where the private sector can see what that's looking like and it needs to invest in its human capital and secure that future. At the moment, that's been at risk. We've had so much uncertainty in terms of what that pipeline looks like. So, you know, I really believe that if we focus on creating that enabling environment, that the private sector will respond, and we probably don't need as much centralized command and control to unlock the opportunities in this space.
Thank you. Dr. Abby, did you want to add to that one? I saw a reaction there. Shall we go to Titania?
I agree with Dr. Clinton.
You agree with that? Thank you.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to add, but I was smiling because I was interested if Carla is going to say if some of that funds will be used for the just transition plan that's on the cards. So I don't want to pose the question, Carla. I just made the assumption it would. But I agree with Dr. Clinton. The pipeline is here. There's going to be lots of construction and operations. A lot of jobs are going to be created in not just in the short term, but there's a pipeline, right? And so continuously you'll see those jobs now being created.
Yeah.
I'm actually just sorry.
Sorry, Clint, we'll get to you, Carla.
So I'm actually just with this whole COP27. I mean, yesterday the Republic of South Africa met with the IPG leaders to discuss the new jet investment plan prepared by the South African government. So I think that needs to be scrutinized as well. What is in that plan? The plan covers 3 priority sectors: the energy sector, as well as the electric vehicle and green hydrogen sectors for finance. So I'm not quite sure what the training allocation of that is, but I mean, in those 3 sectors, I think they would be looking at training and education. But yeah, it's a 5-year to begin with, and then a 20-year what they're planning at the moment. So that money has to last for a long time. That's why I was smiling. And as we all know, money goes quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Clint, you wanted to add?
Yeah, and by way of example, you know, one of the realities we have as a country is that we've got a lot of we call shovel-ready projects that could, you know, get into operation relatively quickly, where a lot of investment has been made, but are increasingly going to be stranded through a lack of transmission grid capacity. So, you know, I personally feel quite strongly that a lot of funding and focus needs to be in unlocking that. That's going to unlock a lot of projects and capacity that gets energy on the grid quite quickly and cost effectively, that helps drive the economy. So, you know, if we can unlock the bottlenecks that get projects, you know, on the grid as quickly as possible, that's what's going to then drive the jobs and stuff. You know, people aren't going to be investing in the jobs if the project pipeline and the uncertainty is there. And addressing bottlenecks such as transmission grid becomes mission critical for that. So use the precious money to be very surgical and say, where are the initiatives that the private sector can't lead on, that is required some kind of stimulus and leading and investment to unlock, and then let the private sector come in on the back of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Davin?
Last point there, I think, just to echo that, I think it's really important to understand that unlocking role that government has to play. Absolutely vital. But what's really interesting in the last short while, we've picked up that there's a whole private initiative to invest in grid, simply because Eskom's not going to be able to do that. And we picked up yesterday as well that there's a company, an international company, that's now set itself up in a small rural Northern Cape Town, and their focus is going to be solely on rolling out grid and grid development and transformers, etc., and enabling that environment. So it's very interesting to just see what Clinton's saying is, once the signals are there, that money that will come needs to be used frugally, but can be used to leverage other funding from private investment sources. And people are actually out there taking the risk on South Africa. They're jumping in and they can see the need. It's just how quickly we can enable that to happen. And that'll be a whole different set of grid engineers, electrical engineers, people doing grid build with very specific technical skills, and fairly labor absorptive practices and skill sets in a part of the country that probably needs that economic injection. So I think that's quite a positive signal.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much. Anyone want to add a closing remark for us? Dr. Lauren?
I would just like to say that this conversation, I think, will have to go on. I don't think it's a once off, and I really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you very much. But I think it needs to be done on a regular basis.
Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you for that support there, and we will make that happen. Anybody else?
I'll just say that one of my take-home messages from the conversation is that basically we need to empower the youth with the knowledge of where their skills are needed, and then ensure that when they come, that we are able to transfer those skills and experiences.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Titania, any last comment from your side?
Well, I think we on the one hand, we've got a high unemployment rate, and on the other hand, we've got a shortage of skills and experience required, and so we just need to match those, right, in a structured way, and we'll solve this issue. And I think that we need energy in this country, and we can't deliver that energy without the skills.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Ricardo, last message from your side?
Yeah, like everybody says, lots of work to do. I think we know where we want to go and what we want to achieve, but as everybody says, we need to get this message out there, and we need to ensure that we all pull in the same string into the same direction, and then I think we can achieve a lot. And then obviously one of the things which we haven't really mentioned here, but I think continuity is important, that there is not like lots of gaps in the industry anymore like we had in the past. But I think that's kind of that risk is kind of mitigated a little bit with the combination of REAP and private projects and so on. So I'm looking forward, and I think it's a very positive future that we have ahead of us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Devin.
I just think industry is there, it's ready to move. If government creates the enabling environment and maintains that momentum, industry will be there and will respond as it always does to the opportunity. And of course, the challenge is, in what way do we respond, and how do we interact with the other parties that we need to support us as we try to meet those challenges and as new ones come along. So it is definitely going to need a lot more coordination. But the central point for us is the signal that government now sends to say South Africa is really open for business, but more importantly, how is it going to happen? That detail that we've all talked about and some of the questions have focused on, is very much in the detail in how the journey rolls itself out. And that's where South Africa, we're great at policies. We've got fantastic policies, great constitution, a whole lot of great formative documents, but we are really finding it very difficult to implement. And I think that's where it's really going to take a massive effort to get the implementation to really roll itself out properly. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Div, from your side?
Apologies if I'm going to give a longer one, but Project Drawdown is a study that was done to say how do we bring carbon back and what are the 100 best things we can do. And I think the fourth one was girl-child education. It even beat solar PV, all solar PV types. And what they found is that if we keep girl children in schools up to 18 years old, we don't need to have birth control there, because on average, if they leave school at 12, they will have 5 children. If they leave school at 18, they will have an average of 2.5, and we will have a sustainable earth to live in. And I think that's what our aim should be, is how do we keep our children in our schools longer? And one example I want to use is the whole language that is forced on us with the curriculum up to matric. And everyone needs to know the future perfect tense and past participles and all of that, whilst the spell checkers do it for you. I think Ricardo's mention of those containerized science labs, we put solar on those roofs, Ricardo, and good to go, and put them in the Karoo. We'll educate our nation. I love that idea. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Div. Clint, anything last comment from your side?
Yeah, just thanks. Very important conversation. I think clearly lots of work to do and huge opportunity. And I think we owe it to everyone to really find the solutions here. We need some kind of social pacts across private sector, business, industry, tertiary education. There's so many moving parts here. So yeah, personally would really want to make a difference. I think we all want to make a difference there and leave a legacy, and actually see some new young people come in. And I think it's just immensely satisfying to be able to be part of that. So much of our work lives is there connecting the dots and in many senses quite corporate. I think this topic takes us into being true citizens of the country and of the continent and of the globe. How do we leave things in a better place? And I think renewable energy has this wonderful opportunity to do that in a sustainable way, whilst actually really improving people's lives and creating new opportunities. So I think we're going to have a lot to celebrate, but we're also going to have a lot of challenges in terms of getting there. So yeah, looking forward to being part of that in the years ahead.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you so much. Dr. Abby, we will close with your final remark. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Isa. First of all, I would like to thank all distinguished panelists for their participation today. It really makes a huge difference to our students' lives, because we are going to play this recording to our students, and I'm sure that they are going to gain a lot. So thank you. I think that it's extremely important that we, as one of the providers of the higher education and vocational education industry, share the responsibility in terms of definitely reducing the gap and definitely creating, or I should say, go for the curriculum development that is not only, as many panelists have already said, based on theory or academic aspect only, but also understand the practical applications. So so definitely I think our endeavors will lead to a better future. And we are hoping that we are going to have further conversations like this that would also assist our students as well as trainers, because as we discussed that we don't have adequate number of trainers, especially in terms of green industry that we require in the country. So hopefully our joint endeavors and joint efforts would lead to that as well. Thank you, Isa.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Abby. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate, and I hope we'll get together soon. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Cheers. Bye.